Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Crossroads of Cognizance, the one stop shop where we are creating a community that discusses all things woo woo and energy work, witchcraft, spirituality, and all of this is to open up your minds, your hearts, and give something new a chance, really. But while we're getting set up, while we are navigating being live now, letting some people come on. We want to go over a couple things. So if this is your first time joining us, this you're going to want to hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube. So when we go live again, you're going to want to hit the, I think it's a follow button on Facebook so that you can follow us on our Facebook page and to interact with us on Facebook because Facebook has so many rules. You're going to want to click onto the video so that we can see your comments. So we're going to come right through on our stream. Even if it's just a hello, we'll see you. If we get a chance, we'll say something. But if you have something to say today about being in a state of flow, we definitely want to hear from you. This topic has a lot of interesting cornerstones. It's not actually a woo-woo based comment, a woo-woo based topic. It transcends spirituality, but it has a lot of positive implications for spirituality. So we thought we'd talk about it today. But I think, unlike normal in these introductions, I'm gonna let my co-host introduce herself first.
Wow. Okay. I'm writing a note based on what you just said. Hang on just a second for our discussion.
Okay.
Okay, because I knew I would forget that. So, hi, everybody. I'm Katrina Rashold, and I'm feeling very tall today. I am 5'5", and I never get to feel tall in any environment. Literally, every one of my kids, plus my husband, are leagues taller than I am. I raised this Amazonian tribe of giants. And so whenever I'm hugging anybody, I'm like right here in their armpit, and it's so precious when they pat me on the head. But today in this live stream, look at me. I get to be tall. So that's pretty exciting. I had a friend that was Jennifer was 5'11", and it was devastating to me when she died. Not just because she was my friend and I'd been friends with her for decades, but because she was so much shorter than I was. And wow, I had nowhere left to rest my elbow. Anyway, hi, I'm Katrina Rashold, and I am the co-owner of CrossroadsOfCognizance. My husband and I specialize in making magical products for people. We make all sorts of powders and sprays and candles and curios and things like that for people, and sell them on CrossroadsOfCognizance and at various festivals throughout the Sacramento area. I also provide readings for people with Lenormand and tarot cards. I teach classes. I do spell work for people for hire and do spiritual cleansings for people. And so I've been a witch for, oh, I would say around 40 years. And have been a professional witch for around 20 of those. I also retired from storefront work in October and now do everything online because of technology being a thing. And I am privileged that one of the things I do online is get to talk to you folks every week with this lovely partner that I have who, God willing, will just throw a handful of dirt on my grave because I never want to be without her. This is Dahlia Rose.
I think it's important to call attention to the fact that we are both Virgos, and what that comes with is a dark sense of humor. And I will absolutely throw a handful of dirt on
That's
your grave,
it.
and probably myself too, because I will deeply miss you. So,
Please make
it'll,
sure it's grave dirt from that grave and not from around and about. Okay.
you've taught me. I understand how these things work.
And watch the other motherfuckers that are around to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do too.
All right, guys, we have a plan. We all know how
Thank
energy
you.
and ghosts and spirits work. So here
Oh
we
my
go.
God.
But, you know, um, I suppose it's my turn. And in the spirit of feeling, I am feeling a little crunchy today. I don't feel tall. And I have to ask for everybody's sort of forgiveness, as there's a chance that I may sound like I'm going through my second bout of puberty today, as my voice cracks with all the pollen in the air and all of that lovely, lovely allergies. And very innocently, I once had somebody ask, "Can't you use energy work to take care of that?" And yes and no. There is an energy component to it, but sometimes you just got to go through these things. But anyway, I am Dahlia Rose. I am the founder of the Conduit School. I serve my community as a healer, a teacher, a conduit for high vibrational energies. I also do this by teaching my students and guiding them through spiritual development, energy work, meditation classes, crystal usage, energy work services, and counseling. I'm also a cosmic weaver. I found that out the other day. I thought it was an interesting term and I like it. I pull together energies and ancient techniques to support healing and teach people different practices that brings transformation to expand the way that we look at healing. That's my ultimate goal, to change it, to change the culture of it, help us reconnect with our bodies and feel empowered to be more than we ever thought possible. So with all of that, some of what
That
I
is
do.
impressive. And I'm here going, I rub eggs on people.
No, because some of that is what I do. I learned how to do limpias from Katrina, and turns out my family also used to conduct these kinds of things in Costa Rica, so that's lovely. And I do readings and candle work and all these things that are similar to Katrina. I hope to catch up to her book writing one day. That's really another goal of mine. But in the spirit of all of that, in the spirit of reconnection and the spirit of um, uh, looking at healing in a different way, today's show topic is being in a state of flow. So, flow state is something that is, I think, more of a psychology topic ish, but it's relevant. It has relevance to, like I said earlier, to uh, spirituality and things of that nature. I think it's important to kind of get an idea of what flow state is, because much like many things in spirituality, there's overlap with other things. We have talked on this show about synchronicities, and it may seem at times that within flow state, synchronicities are happening. So I think it's important to create some bit of a distinction and then go right into defining what flow state is. Synchronicities tend to be, so they're technically defined as things that occur that have meaning to the person they are occurring for. So that is to say, you're thinking about, uh, I don't know, connecting with the divine and wanting the divine to hear your requests or prayers. And all of a sudden, you see an eagle swoop by, and they symbolize connection with the divine and that the divine hears your prayers. Or you catch angel numbers that do that for you, like 000 is actually quoted as the divine, the universe, God hearing your prayers. So those can be synchronistic moments, and they're synchronistic because they're meaningful to you. And I think distinctly from flow, they can operate individually. Synchronicities can happen individually. You can have one a day, you can have 80 a day. That would be an amazing day. But if you get up to that point where you have 80 a day, you also may get into a place of flow. And that's the overlap, is, at least in my opinion, where you've had so many events that have pulled you out of being singularly focused on yourself and how you relate to the world, and you open up to this next level where you sort of become one with everything. You forget your individuality and you kind of merge with everything around you, and that space of freedom, that space of not only being a mom, not only being a healer, not only operating as whoever you are in your life, that for me is flow state. There's effortlessness in it. You're absorbed into what you're doing. And it's almost like you enter a different reality. Um, and some examples of this can look like those musicians that really get lost in their music when they're playing, and you see them kind of moving and flowing with the music, and it's almost like you're watching a living embodiment of that music. Or dance. I know that I've definitely got into flow state with dance before, and maybe you all have too. So when you're thinking, um, I'm gonna throw this question to Katrina, because obviously I'm like blah 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 blah. But what do you guys experience when it comes to flow state? Now that I've given some examples and a little bit of a definition, and Katrina's going to expand here for us. Katrina, what is flow state for you?
One of the key components of flow state, which when Eric and I began teaching this back in 97, the word flow state had not come together just yet psychologically. And so we called it being in the zone. And it was when you're in that perfect spiritual state where it just feels like, for lack of a better term, you can do no wrong. You're just, everything is headed toward a pre-designed outcome that's magnificent, and everything comes together to support that, including your own actions. The thing is that when we evolve that mindset of considering flow state, one of the key points is mastery. You are unlikely to achieve a flow state in something you are just learning or just beginning to develop because of the problems with self-doubt that come up. As soon as we are having a chunky rollout of something, we tend to not get into the flow. So mastery is usually important to flow state. An example of this is many people reach their flow state when they're driving. And if they're on an open highway and the roads are open before them and they've got a beautiful view, they can just go into their higher self while they're driving and not think about every move you have to make when you're driving. Now, a kid that's just getting their license is not going to hit flow state when they're driving. No. They're going to be thinking about, I've got to do this with the clutch. I've got to do this with the brake. I've got to push on the gas just this much. Oh my gosh, look at the speedometer. What's happening there? You've got all of this mental dialogue going on. And the least little error, whether you're in mastery or just learning, can trip up the flow state. Like with driving, let's say that you're in your flow state and you're really feeling it. You are on top of the world. You just want to, lean your head out the window like a puppy and just let your tongue flap in the breeze because you're just really feeling this driving experience. And all of a sudden you look up and there's lights in your back window and you get pulled over for speeding. Suddenly that flow state will be interrupted. When you get back onto the road again, you will not immediately achieve that flow state because something came up that caused you to question yourself and feel fallible in some way. And so another thing that I see this with is typing. When I was in school, we had typing drills that we did in typing class. And so we had actual big typewriters at that time when the dinosaurs roamed and the earth was cooling. And so we would have to do exercises that were like J, J, J space, K, K, K space, L, L, L space, Sim, Sim, Sim space, and all of these drills. And you could get 3/4 of the way down a page and just be in that zone, just typing. And then you make an error. And as soon as you make that one error, you make 50 more. It's disrupted your role. And so it's important to recognize that flow state is fabulous, but it depends on mastery and it's easily disrupted. It's fragile. And I think that one of the things to bring up about flow state, and like I said, self-doubt is one of the fastest ways that you will disrupt your flow state, is that it's addictive. We get excited about being in flow state. It feels good, and we want that back. And so there's a part of us, even when we're not in flow state, that craves flow state, that really, gosh, I felt so good last week. Why do I feel off this week? And we also get pressure from the outside world to be in flow state. When we are working and in any type of managed position working, that company wants productivity. They want you to be in flow. They don't do the things to support flow, but they want you to be in a good productive measure. They actually found, I don't know if you heard about this study or not. I'm just all over the place with this. Sorry, it's one of my favorite topics. They did a study where they had workers guaranteed uninterrupted work for the entire morning, like until noon, until lunch break. Nobody's allowed to interrupt anybody else. The phones are shut off. People are not allowed to go over and chat with each other. You can't ask if they want coffee, if they want to. I mean, you are dedicated to your work. Productivity went up 65%.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And so that lack of interruption is also an important part of being in flow. And too often life interrupts us. And we don't set the boundaries to say, look, I'm going to be in here writing for 3 hours. Unless the house is burning down around me, don't come in that door. Because I'm going to be focused on what I'm doing.
Right.
So there's so many components of flow state. I hope that we get time in just an hour to cover everything involved with flow state. But number one, it's addictive. Number two, it needs focus. Number three, it needs mastery. Number four, set boundaries to protect it. I mean, flow state it's just the shit. It is fantastic. And when you're in flow state, you feel unstoppable. And flow state can happen in your job. It can happen in your hobby. It can happen in your parenting. It can happen in your relationship. There's so much that flow state can affect. And we do crave it. We do want it. Another thing that happens is the ability to adapt. You know, that is what has lately interrupted my flow state, is that stuff has happened. Sometimes it's traumatic, sometimes it's not, but change has happened. And I haven't been able to successfully integrate that change in order to establish a flow. And so I'm just curious, what do you find either interrupts or facilitates your flow state?
So for me, facilitation of flow state actually, so when going over this topic, I was trying to think of things that or times when I made that transition. So first starting out in the healing realm, learning Reiki was my first, actually it was my second healing modality. The first was actually more of flow state. It was called Solaris Energy Healing Technique. And it had no real structure. And so we were free to feel into what was there. And we were only given subtle clues about what was there, and then we were coaxed into exploring without the sense of right or wrong. And I think that's an important thing when attempting to achieve flow state, is that there cannot be this structure of right or wrong, because flow looks like something different for everybody. Even if you are, say, sitting down to create art or write your masterpiece, you may not flow into that the same way as the next person. So for me, a lot of the times when I've gotten into flow state, it has been transcending, like taking what I've been told, because I think it's important to hear what's possible from others, or taking what has happened from your own experiences, and then going, okay, there has got to be more, and trying to search for the more in those moments. And it may come through something strange. Before getting into my transition story, I had an opportunity to find flow state with embodiment work. when I felt like I had reached everything I could tool wise spiritually, I started to find flow state in my body, nestled between my muscles whenever I would apply a tool to, kind of force that energy out. When I connected with that spot or my entire body, I found flow in the rest of my day. And the version of me that existed 4 years prior would not have had a clue about such a concept. So instead of coming at flow to say, okay, I need to breathe and meditate and, visualize, and then I'll be in flow, I happen to have tried something equally as healing that ushered me into flow. And consistently now I can support myself that way. I can support others that way to get into flow. But again, it's not prescriptive. Flow is not always the outcome. It's the possibility. When I first started doing healing work, the structures were there. Reiki was your hands go here, next level, you get these symbols, last level, you master all of it and yourself at the same time while learning to support others. And I found myself doing that consistently through my sessions. The structure was important. And then slowly but surely, something weird started to happen. And this was, I think, the mastery a little bit that Katrina was talking about. It was like, once I already knew, okay, I'm going to start here, I'm going to do this, I'm going to draw this symbol. Once that started happening, autopilot clicked on, mastery clicked on, because I knew what I was going to do with confidence. And all of a sudden I started having visions and flowing into the session. And, oh, is that Kuan Yin standing over there? And wait a minute, why is Jesus in this session? It's not religious. And it was just this really effortless, orchestrated bubble of energy between me and this person that would, cause healing change for them in a significant way. And so again, I found myself, once I knew what was expected in terms of the techniques, I then got to experience more. And I find this to be possible also with things like automatic writing. And Katrina brought up driving, but you could get into flow doing the dishes or doing laundry because of that automated task that you aren't going to necessarily get down. And all of us have been writing for decades at this point, getting into flow state so that you can write or channel, because flow state also allows for that as well. Attempting to do something you are confident in is a great way to start accessing flow. That's what I would say is getting out of the need to perfect it and do it the same way every single time is how I would get into flow state. The addictive quality of it, I don't know. When I explore that for myself, I don't necessarily find it addicting. I find it like, what I can speak to is I think it's addicting because it is who we are. I think it allows us to get into the actual aspect of who we are. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of you that organizes information and structures and things like that, was created and influenced by your life, by your parents, by the rules they gave you, the rules of your culture and all of that. And when you can pull yourself away from the need to be all of those things, you get into flow. And so I can speak to why I think it's addicting, is because on some levels, that's you in flow state, you can just be yourself. You can just be the expression of the purest part of yourself rather than with all the rules and the equipment and the danglings that you've built in over life.
One of the things that you described, I really see in the healing classes that I taught for so long. And these were long time classes. I mean, these people signed on usually for 24 classes, and they were happening every other week. So they were in a long-term process to learn to do the type of healing that I do. And at first, when they were starting out, it was like driving. You know, they're trying to figure out, okay, so I've got to hit all the check boxes. I got to make sure I do this in this order. I got to make sure that I remember to check this and check this and check this. So they're analyzing and being very analytical about what's happening. But once they're able, you can watch them as they're doing cleansing over and over and over and over and over on people. You can watch them transition and see that moment when they get into flow with that process, so that they're not thinking, I'm going to screw this up, or what if I get this wrong, or what if I miss something, where you can just see them gaining that confidence and speaking out and saying, it feels like there's congested energy right here, or have you had an injury here, or what's going on with this lower back right here, and just being very free with their discussion with the client and just flowing with it. And then you see them just light up. They're so in the zone with that. And to me, that's so rewarding to have given somebody that process. But what I was talking about for me personally with the addictive quality, for me now, if I am not in the zone, things feel off. If I'm not in flow, I feel like, especially if it's, I mean, you expect that it's not always going to be there. Like I said, it's fragile. Stuff breaks it out. Trauma breaks it out. You may only be in flow state in certain circumstances. Right. But there's an overall flow state to life where it's not fixated on one particular activity, but your life in general feels like it's in flow state. That gives me such a sense of ease and joy and purpose that in absence of that, things tend to feel very dreary and cumbersome and clunky and just not, like the gears aren't hitting all the right places. And when that starts to happen, I kind of throw up my hands and just, where's my flow? Why can this not be? And one of the places where I feel flow best is when I'm doing a cleansing on somebody, whether it's by remote or in person. And for a while, I felt like if things were not really great on the outside, I was going to have a challenge getting into the zone to cleanse. And I found quickly that I could just cubby this and compartmentalize and take a few minutes ahead of time to get in my zone, clean myself out, and then do the work and be in flow for that. And I could start to trust that that was a place where it would always come. And I haven't had that let me down yet, where I felt like, gosh, this cleansing just feels off. The only time I've had a cleansing feel off is if the client was being less than truthful with me about their situation. And then it felt clunky and weird because I know I'm getting information, I'm getting feedback, and they are disputing that feedback. And it's not that I'm always right, but it feels really off if the client is telling me something completely contradictory to what I'm getting. I start to doubt myself. I start to feel uncomfortable that maybe I didn't do the cleansing right. And then eventually it comes out, well, no, actually, like, thanks.
Well, and with your definition of the disruptions that come to flow, your further explanation of it helps me to identify that, yes, that does happen. So I didn't mean to say like, oh, I'm always in flow and I never get out of it. That is nonsense. But I think with my expectation of going in and out of flow, because yes, it is who we are, but unless you live in the Himalayas and can be that all the time, you're going to have to come down and parent and do earthy things and talk to people who may not be in flow or not be ready to move into that space with you. But I'm always, as I went over this topic for myself, I felt like there was a possibility to be in flow even when it doesn't feel good. Like there is a flow to the healing when we're doing the work and we find something icky, or we find a trauma nestled in there. It's not necessarily a positive experience, but it's like, okay, now where can I flow this energy, or how can I flow with this?
It
um
becomes a productive thing. And I
right.
think that becomes the flow itself, is that
Right.
you're producing a positive outcome.
Oh, yeah, yeah, but there's room for it to start off as not as such. So, you find the thing, and for me, one of my places of comfort and flow is conversation. So if I can sit with somebody, lock eyes with them, and rather than expect to have the right words, I just simply allow myself to fall into the conversation. I disappear, like the persona of Dahlia goes away, and all that's left is someone who's interested in understanding what's in front of me, not from a place of control, not from a place of needing things to go a particular way, but just being open. That's my place. And I think that that kind of plays along into my ability to channel verbally, is when I get into that conversational space of flow. I disappear and something else comes in and starts talking and sharing information. And it's, oh my goodness, the right thing at the right time, et cetera, et cetera. It is only when I come back and I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to be a reader, and this tarot card means this and this means that. And it gets a little clunky and chunky. And then with the finding something strange in somebody's energy field or working on the body to heal, opening up to, rather than saying, I need this trauma or this energy to move, I need it to change, I need to rip it out of this person's body. Flow state for me in those less than positive situations looks like, what does this trauma want? What does this energy want? How does it want to move beyond my fixed idea of what is needed here? And that's not always an easy thing to get into, especially when you are looking at a person suffering and you want to support their desire to not suffer anymore. To step back and say, okay, well, I understand that this is painful. I've had plenty of clients where I speak to the trauma, like literally I'm in the session talking to the energy and ask it, are you ready to move? Are you ready to heal? Are you ready to, change? And it says no. And there's a number of reasons for that to happen. If it's a soul retrieval, where I'm trying to bring back a part of a person, but that person's life still reflects every reason why that soul part left. That soul part is like, I'm not getting back in there. No chance, no dice, leave me alone,
Mm-hmm.
And then the conversation, while still in flow, is, okay, well, what can we do to bridge this gap until things change? And that can still be a place of flow for a client. They may be trying to make changes in their life. It may be challenging, but in their state of flow, they can see how everything connects. They can see how parts of their personality may have, contributed to something, or how parts of their personality may lead to resolutions of something. And then they go on and flow in that way. I think the dance of going back and forth is important, though. I think that we do need to kind of come out of flow for sure. And that was
Oh,
long.
absolutely. I think we can't recognize flow unless we also have being out of flow.
Yeah.
When you're talking about healing trauma, of course, one of the things that we see in the egg is the presence of the trauma bubbles. And that tells us that there are traumas this client is going through that they've not resolved. They still affect how this person engages the world. And when I explain this to people and show them the trauma bubbles, immediately their response often is, "Well, get rid of it. How, pull it out. How do you get rid of it?" And what I have to back them up to is, hey, this is objective information.
Mm-hmm.
This is saying that the trauma exists. It's not pushing it. It's not asking you to cure it. It's not telling you to get past it. It's simply identifying that the trauma exists, and it may not be time to release it. As you mentioned, if a woman had a soul fracture because she's with an abusive partner, and that partner got better or is not currently abusing her, you're not going to be able to get that soul fragment back in there. You're just not, because that soul fragment looks up and sees that the abuser is still right there in front of them.
Right.
And so it's going to take a massive amount of discussion and overhaul to get that piece back in there when that piece sees the same circumstances there. So sure, it's very situational as to whether that trauma can even be resolved, and sometimes that trauma will never be resolved. And that then, like you said, becomes your flow. One of the things I have noticed, and I don't know if this is just me or if this is a universal thing, but when we have ongoing places of flow that happen in our life on a regular basis, that tends to influence the bigger picture. It's like a microcosm and a macrocosm. So if we are having flow states that happen in certain situations throughout our week, throughout our day, that aids us in having an overall sense of flow to our lives. When we are in a circumstance where nothing's working or it feels like we can't find flow for a long period of time, then often our entire life feels out of sorts and disjointed. I think this also comes back to that idea that I've talked about repeatedly about the zone of genius and the zone of ability, and being able to achieve that zone of genius where not only do you have a mastery of something, but you really love it and you really enjoy it. And the more that you can go into those things, the more that flow state gets facilitated. And so for me, and again, this might also be a Virgo thing, but if I go for weeks without achieving flow state in anything, I get cranky. I really like to feel that sense of, I don't know, for me, there's a completion that comes in when I'm in a state that I just crave. I really enjoy that. And so when I haven't had that in a while, or when I'm in a situation where I constantly feel out of my element, or like I'm not mastering something that is just defeating me, boy, I'm just lost.
I can definitely empathize. I think the place that I see that most, my poor partner, is when I cannot have flow state in my flow state conversations in my relationship. I'm probably overly communicative, and so and that could be a Virgo thing, right? So my brain is like da 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 da, and so there's this desire to constantly, well, what do you think about this? And how does this feel? And did you know this leads to that? And, and it's just, I want this like torrent of connection and realization. And if I don't get that for weeks, I am a bit cranky myself. So I can definitely empathize with that. It's less so with like, I think because of how much I can get sucked into work, I don't expect flow with that. Like, I'm just like, I don't know, it'll come or it won't. I am very forgiving with the rest of life, but when it comes to connecting and communication, if I don't have that for a period of time, I'm definitely out of my element. I think also on the topic of connecting with flow, I think that when a person first starts their spiritual journey, flow state is extremely important, because if you are trying to master a healing modality, or your world is crumbling around you because you realize all of the false concepts I feel like flow can be an opportunity to get out of the crumbling, not in a way that escapes it, but a way that pulls all of that together. Like, grieve what you need to in order to understand that, this is what you're leaving behind, or you can't tolerate anymore, or whatever is going on for you. Flow comes in to say, okay, but these are the things that I mined out of that process, and this is how I can go on to use it for X, Y, and Z. Like, if I think that an artist who is having some sort of spiritual awakening can take what may have held them back and pull that into flow state to create something beautiful, and find a way to move through the chaos that ensues with that, the beginning parts of the spiritual journey. And I should even say beginning parts of the spiritual journey, because it happens for veterans too. I mean, when I first opened the shop, I felt like a baby again. When I closed the shop, I felt like a baby again. So, there's this need to find your flow. And we can also get into not just finding it, but recognizing it if it's happening for you. We've talked about, Katrina talked about it when she was doing a cleansing on people. She recognizes flow during that time. I recognize it conversationally or when I'm channeling, and definitely in healing sessions. But what if you're not a healer? Where else could we find it? And one way to understand when flow is upon you, like the Holy Ghost, is a great sense of clarity. So when you feel clear, when things feel like they're lining up, you can also feel self-motivated, intrinsically motivated. And there's a sense of peace and serenity that comes over you and is around you. You get that sort of tunnel vision that Katrina mentioned earlier, where you're focused on a task. You're in the zone. That's the phrasing. So these are just some things that can indicate your sense of being in the flow, how you can recognize it.
There's also ways that we trip up our own flow with the words that we say. Mm-hmm. And so that's important to address too. Anytime that we're having a potential flow experience and we feel overwhelmed, sometimes we'll say things like, I can't do this, this is too hard. This is outside of my skill set. Now, sometimes it genuinely is. But the thing is that once you say, I can't do this, there is a psychological process that says, okay, you can't. And so if you say instead, this is really challenging, instead of I can't do this, or you reframe things in such a way that it becomes accomplishable. It doesn't mean you're going to accomplish it, but it means that there is hope and potential for that. Once you cut that off by saying, I can't do this, it's a dead end. And what's interesting about you choosing this topic, Dahlia, is that just a couple of days ago, I woke up in the morning and I had a saying in my head that I had not heard before. And it was, if you truly, really believe that you cannot do something, nobody can make you do it. No matter how hard they push or try, they can't make you do it. If you truly believe you can do something, nobody can stop you from doing it. And I made an actual meme and put it on my Facebook so that I would remember this. And I think that's really the essence of flow, is that if you convince yourself you can't do something, if you're constantly negative, if you always believe things are not going to work out for you, it is almost impossible to enter a flow state. Mm-hmm. If you believe you're incompetent, if you say, oh gosh, I always screw things up, why am I such an idiot? If you give yourself that kind of feedback, it will be almost impossible to go into flow state. If you are loving and forgiving with yourself, if you encourage yourself in terms of how you engage the world, in terms of your productivity, If you say, that was tough, but boy, I got through it, I'm excited for the next thing. If you say things like that, that encourages a flow state. So your self-talk is so important, I think, in the ability to enter flow. And admittedly, I got to say, positive feedback from other people is also a big part of flow. It's
Oh,
not
for sure.
essential to it, but it's huge.
It might be essential. I mean, you can carry yourself only as far as you have been. So when others step in to call attention to, what you have going on, I can't tell you. I mean, I love my community so much. I can't tell you how many times I've been like, nope, this is garbage. And somebody comes in and they're like, are you kidding? Like, the other day talking to somebody, another healer that I highly respect, who was like, I was like, yeah, I'm in this place where I know that I'm capable of more, and I'm just sort of not doing it. And they're like, what else? You've done so, you have kids, you had a shop, you had all of these things going on, and you're a successful healer. Like, what else? And I was like, well, I didn't think about it like that. To me, there will always be more. But I was allowed to be, I was given an opportunity, that person set down a ladder for me to step out of my prefrontal cortex that was telling me, you're not doing enough. You've got this list of things you haven't completed over here, and it's ever growing, to this flow state of, you don't need to be doing anything specifically right now, but you can fall into this place of inspiration from this person. So I don't know, I have to say, having been in places where I was stuck, I feel like feedback from others is absolutely essential. Like,
I agree
essential.
with that point. What I meant to say when I said that I don't know that it's essential, there have been times nobody around me believed I could accomplish what I was trying to do.
Oh, yeah. Well, fuck
And
them.
I was determined. It was, you know what? I'm doing this. And I got into flow and I did it. And they're like, oh my God, she did it. When everybody was saying, well, maybe you shouldn't. Well, maybe you shouldn't demand so much of yourself. Maybe you should back off a little bit. So in that context, I don't believe it's essential, because I believe that sometimes enough of us comes forward that we can be the force that makes it happen, even if everybody else is doubting. But what you're saying, I totally get, especially with my writing. When
Mm.
I'm doing writing and I'm in the flow, there's this scene in the movie Romancing the Stone, where the main character is writing her romance novel. Joan Wilder is her name. And she's writing and writing and writing, and tears are just flowing. And she goes, this is so good. And it's how it is when you're writing something that is just, oh my God, I can't believe I'm writing this, because this is really good. I'll go back and read some of my old writing, which I just recently had pause to do, and think, this is really good. I can't believe I did this. This is a beautiful book. And so that we get into a zone or into a flow with writing as authors, but then we hit those horrible writer's blocks where we're working on a book and it should be moving and we know the direction it's supposed to take. We have an outline and the book is just not getting from one step to the next. It's just hitting these roadblocks. And my son Joe is my salvation on this. He will absolutely do not an autopsy, but definitely exploratory surgery on what's happening. And there was a time about 6 months ago where I was aggressively working on a book that was late. I was due for this new book a year before.
Mm.
And he's going over it, and I'm talking to Joe, I don't know what to do. This book is not moving. I've got flippers on the keyboard doing this. It's just coming out nonsense. And he went over it with me and he said, Mom, I don't think this is your next book in the series. I think this other girl is your next book in the series. I think you need to table this book and write the next book, because it has important components that you're missing. And I did, and was immediately in the zone. So sometimes somebody else can objectively look at what you're doing and say, oh, no. This just needs a slight adjustment. And it's something so obvious. that you didn't see it. And then you can get totally in the zone.
Absolutely. That second set of eyes, it's fresh. You've been looking at it constantly. Absolutely. And so I think we're sort of edging a little bit too into ways to cultivate flow, right? Sometimes it'll be feedback from others. Sometimes, like if you're just not there, have somebody you trust kind of get into a dialogue with you, or take a glance at your project and see what kind of feedback they give, if it helps um, you know pull you out of where you're stuck. Another way to cultivate flow is to do something that may challenge you. I mean, in order to access flow, it can't be mundane, whatever it is that you reach for. So it has to be something that you haven't well, I don't say it doesn't have to be something you haven't tried before, but maybe in a way that you haven't tried it. We spoke to that a little bit earlier. Checking in with yourself, because sometimes cultivating flow, you don't know when you're doing it. So if you have an opportunity to um, uh, like check in with yourself each day to increase your levels of awareness, then you can also learn when you're in flow in other activities. So I thought this was interesting. One of the ways that I wanted to expand my knowledge on the topic of flow was to watch some TED Talks. Um, and uh, they were talking about, one of the videos talked about how you can be in flow when you're watching TV, as long as you're getting positive feedback. And I recall watching a documentary on God that was narrated by, and he starred in it too, Morgan Freeman, and how my understanding of God versus everything that Morgan Freeman was talking about with different cultures was expanded. I found myself in flow with the topic and the cultures that he was stepping into, because I was getting feedback from the show. It wasn't just something mindless. So if you check in with yourself, oh, and I'm sorry, a blue heron just flew by my window. Love that. um, when you check in with yourself to know, am I in flow? Am I, what am I doing? How am I feeling? Um, what am I doing when I'm feeling this thing? All of that, that's a good way to recognize flow in your life. And then if you find yourself stuck and you're trying to cultivate flow, go do that thing. See if you can replicate the process. If you have the energy to. I mean, we're not talking about, I don't want to be an ableist here and say like everybody should be able to do. No, that's not what we're talking about, but that you have the energy and the available dopamine to do it. But you can also cultivate flow through doing something that meets a need for you. So perhaps you need a hug and you need somebody to just hold you. And so you find somebody that you're comfortable with having that experience, and you go and you do that. And it will put you into a place where you can move from stuckness again into flow. Uh, you can uh, create strategies around your flow once you recognize how you get into it, different things that can put you in that zone. And so those would be my recommendations on how to cultivate it if you're trying.
You know, I think that there are people who go through their entire life and never find flow.
Mm.
And I really think that takes a toll on the spirit. I think that that can lead to things like drug addiction and sex addiction. I think it can lead to feelings of despondency, because the idea of flow by its nature indicates, as I started out the conversation with, a form of mastery.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't ever reach that level of self-confidence and ability so that you're allowing yourself to feel mastery, then everything feels overwhelming to you. And so we've talked about a lot of different areas of flow. And imagine if you could get to a place where all of your relationships are in flow. where your money is in flow and your relationship with prosperity is in flow, where your avocation, or your things that you do every day to feel worthwhile, if all of that is in flow. And I think that that is what becomes that point of actualization, is being able to negotiate that flow with every part of your life. And I can't imagine a more perfect state to be, because when you are in flow, it isn't as though adversity comes up and you just trip and all the flow goes away. You can incorporate adversity into your flow. Your ability to manage crisis can be part of your flow and can become part of the dance. When Eric and I wrote Reuniting the Two Selves in 2013, we talked quite a bit about this idea of flow. And what comes about with it is this notion of joining higher self, our smarter self, our more sacred self, our self that is connected to the divine, with our conscious self, so that they are constantly communicating. And one of the examples we give is that for most people, their conscious self and their higher self are like a divorcing couple in the same room. They are intimately familiar with each other, but they're not speaking right now. They don't want a connection. They don't want to talk. And you have to find ways to get them to interact and be communicative with one another and be harmonious with one another. And when you do that, when you connect higher self with your conscious self, that makes flow so much easier. Now, that's not to say that I feel like that people who are agnostic or people who are atheists are unable to get flow. Anybody can get flow. You have to find what it is that motivates you and causes you to feel, connected, even if it's with self. So you don't have to have a higher power in order to achieve this. But higher power is often an avenue to achieving that flow. That's my feeling, at least. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Connection to anything, self, other, higher power. As long as it's a what I want to call a clean connection. Not founded in gain, but just being. A connection of just being.
Yeah. One of the places I see people in flow with that they don't recognize as flow is with their pets.
Yeah,
people often have a very flow state relationship with a beloved pet. So that even when everything else is crashing down, they can go spend time with that pet and feel whole and feel healed, feel reciprocated, feel appreciated, feel masterful, and just enjoy the flow state they have with that animal.
For sure. 100%. When you said, I think that you think that people go their whole lives without finding it, it brought to mind the lack of awareness, right? Like you said, they may have a pet, but they're not going to recognize the connection. And really, there's an ecstasy to flow that people, I think, don't know how to recognize, and maybe on some levels don't feel deserving of, because they haven't worked hard enough for it to get it. They haven't done enough, been enough, whatever the case is. And so, the journey of flow is a journey back home to self, just like Katrina was saying. And like we spoke to it earlier, there's an opportunity for, when you get into it, for you to recognize that this is just who you are without all the pressure of society. And you deserve that. And it is your birthright to have it. And so this is, I recall one of the videos that was part of researching this topic, talking about that some people see flow as something for the elite or for the privileged. And it is not. It is everybody's opportunity to connect with something beyond what you have built in this life, which leads right back to you. So all in all, thinking about flow state, it is that effortless space that you can get into, getting into your zone. You may find it in your zone of genius. There are opportunities to build it and cultivate it through recognition, through awareness, through, I would even say, tackling old hobbies with a new framework. So if you feel like you've danced before and it was a horrible experience, but that was decades ago, try it again. You're a different person. You think of things differently. You might be surprised. And that mastery piece is part of the effortlessness. And I love that. Thanks, Elspeth, for saying music can also put you in a state of flow. Experiment with different kinds of music. I mean, country is not going to put me in a state of flow, but there are other types out there that would, for me personally, be more flow-ish. But play, I think, is another big part of flow as well. And as we've covered these things, we'd love to hear back from you guys in the comment section. We had Christy on for a little bit who was like, I thought flow was one thing, but it wasn't. If you're finding that too, share it down in the comment section. We want to see more of that and figure out how people are viewing this so that we as a community can kind of expand the way we think about it. And who knows, there's definitely more to be said on this topic. So if there needs to be a part 2, we can definitely do that. But carve out whatever you can to attempt to get into flow 2. I think is the last piece. What Katrina said in the beginning about boundaries, very important. If you can even do that for 30 minutes, I mean, an hour or 2 would be ideal, but 30 minutes, if you can build it up over time, I'm sure you'll find more time. But anyway, that is the show, guys. That is everything we have to say about flow for now. And we'll check back in with you. Check these comments as you're leaving them if you're catching this on the replay. But otherwise, we will catch you next week on Crossroads of Cognizance. Thanks again. Bye, everybody.